Good. Now I'll write the story. New names, new setting, Nashville cabin/property manager scenario, keeping the exact emotional arc, 3-act structure, pacing, and beats from the original. My name is Adrian. I'm 32 years old and I live in Denver, Colorado. I was sitting in a coffee shop 2 blocks from my apartment when my phone lit up with a notification from Facebook. I almost ignored it. I had a deadline in 40 minutes, a proposal due to a client in Austin, and my 3rd cup of coffee was going cold next to my laptop. But the notification said my mother had tagged a location. The location was a place called Blue Ridge Retreat, Gatlinburg, Tennessee. I set the coffee down. I own a cabin in Gatlinburg. I bought it 14 months ago. My mother knows this. My whole family knows this. I paid $340,000 for it in cash, which took me 7 years of disciplined saving while everyone else in my family told me I was being obsessive about money. And now my phone was telling me my mother had just tagged that address on Facebook. I opened the app. The photo loaded in pieces, the way photos do on a slow connection. Top of the image first, then the middle, then the full picture. My mother was standing in front of my stone fireplace, the one I had the chimney professionally cleaned last fall. She was holding a mug with both hands, smiling at the camera with that particular smile she reserves for church events and photos she plans to post publicly. My younger brother was behind her on the leather sectional with his feet up on my coffee table. My aunt was in the kitchen, which you could see through the open archway. She was pulling something out of my refrigerator. The caption read, "Family time in God's country. So grateful for this beautiful place and even more grateful to be surrounded by people who love you unconditionally, living our best life." I read it twice. Then I read the comments. "What a gorgeous cabin. You guys deserve this. So cozy. Did you rent it?" And then my mother's reply, which I stared at for a full 10 seconds. "Ha, no. This is my daughter Adrian's place. She's always saying family is welcome anytime." We decided to take her up on it. I had never said that, not once, not in any context, not as a joke, not as a passing comment. The opposite was true. 3 months ago, after my cousin asked to borrow the cabin for a bachelor party weekend, I told my mother very directly, the cabin is not available for family visits unless I'm there. I need to be able to manage the property. She had said, "I understand, honey. You work so hard." That was the conversation. That was the last thing she said to me about it. I closed the app. I stared at the wall for a moment. The coffee shop was playing some kind of acoustic folk music. A woman at the counter was ordering something complicated with oat milk. Everything around me was completely normal, and something in my chest was pulling very tight. I did not open the proposal document. I picked up my phone and I called my property manager. Her name is Catherine. She is 51 years old, and she has been managing short-term rentals in the Smoky Mountains area for 16 years. She has a voice like river gravel, and she does not panic. I pay her well, and she earns every dollar. She answered on the second ring. "Adrian, hey, I was just about to call you. You see the cameras?" "I see the cameras," she said. "I have 3 adults in the cabin. Entry was at 11:47 this morning using the lockbox code. Adrian, I didn't authorize anyone. The cabin is blocked off on the calendar. I don't know how they got the code. I knew how they got the code 2 years ago. Before I had the smart lock system installed, I had a simple combination lockbox. The code was my grandmother's birthday. I had told my mother once during a phone call in case of emergency. The smart lock system replaced the old lockbox, but I had used the same 4-digit code out of habit. I had never thought to change it. I had never imagined I needed to. "They're family," I said. "My mother and my brother and my aunt." "Okay," Catherine said. She didn't judge. She just processed. "What do you want to do?" I thought for exactly 4 seconds. "I want you to reset every code on the property tonight. The lockbox, the smart lock, the Wi-Fi, the gate, everything. Tonight as in right now. Tonight as in right now. Tonight as in midnight," I said. There was a brief pause. "You want them comfortable until midnight." "I want them comfortable until midnight," I said. And Catherine set the security alarm to away mode at 12:01. If any door or window triggers after that, the siren goes off. It's loud, Adrian. It'll wake up the whole mountain. Good, I said. She didn't laugh. She just said, okay, I'll need you to authorize that in the app. I'll do it right now. I paused. And can you be available tomorrow morning? Early. Around 7. I'll be there at 6:45, she said. I hung up and I sat very still for a moment. The folk music played. The woman with the oat milk order was laughing at something the barista said. I opened my laptop and I wrote the proposal for my Austin client. I finished it in 38 minutes. I sent it 4 minutes before the deadline. I did not call my mother. I already knew what that conversation would sound like. We were just visiting, Adrian. We thought you'd be happy. You didn't ask, Mom. I didn't think I needed to ask. You're my daughter. It's my property. Property. You sound like a landlord, not a daughter. I had that conversation 100 times in my head over the years. It never went anywhere. My mother had a particular talent for reframing every complaint I had into evidence of my character flaws. If I was hurt, I was too sensitive. If I was angry, I was ungrateful. If I set a boundary, I was selfish. She had been doing this my whole life, and she was very good at it. Instead of calling her, I opened the security camera app on my laptop. The cabin has 6 cameras: exterior front, exterior back, driveway, living room, kitchen, and the deck. I use them for the rental business. When guests check in, I review the checkout footage to document the property condition. It is standard practice and it is disclosed in the rental agreement. My family, of course, had never signed a rental agreement. I clicked through the feeds. Camera 1, driveway. My mother's minivan was parked sideways, taking up both spaces. Behind it was my brother's truck, which he had backed up so close to the fence that the bumper was touching the wood. I looked at the fence post. It was leaning slightly. I zoomed in. Yes, he had hit it. Camera 2, living room. My aunt was asleep on the sectional with a throw blanket I recognized from the upstairs bedroom. She had taken it off the bed and brought it downstairs. My brother was still on the couch, still watching television, eating from what appeared to be a full bag of chips he had propped between himself and the armrest. The bag was leaving grease marks on the leather. Camera 3, kitchen. My mother was at the stove. She was cooking something. She was using my cast iron skillet, the one I specifically store with a paper towel between the layers to protect the seasoning, and she was scrubbing it under the faucet with dish soap. I watched her scrub. I watched the seasoning she was removing. It had taken me 4 years to build that seasoning. I closed the laptop. I made dinner. I ate it at my kitchen table in Denver while the sun went down outside my window. I watched a show I had been meaning to finish. At 10:30, I did my skincare routine. At 11:45, I sat down at my desk, opened the security app on my phone, and confirmed the instructions with Catherine. Midnight. I pressed confirm. I watched the camera feed on my laptop. At 12:02, my mother walked to the kitchen sink and turned on the faucet, and nothing happened because I had also cut the water remotely. I had forgotten to mention that part to Catherine. It was a feature of the smart home system I had never actually used before. It worked. My mother turned the faucet handle back and forth several times. She looked confused. She looked at the faucet like it had personally offended her. Then my brother picked up his phone and tried to connect to the Wi-Fi. I watched him frown at the screen. He got up and walked to the router. He unplugged it and plugged it back in, which is what everyone does instinctively, even though it never solves the actual problem. He looked at his phone again. Still nothing. My mother walked to the thermostat to turn up the heat. The thermostat was now locked to 60 degrees. It would not change. She pressed the buttons. She pressed them harder. She turned to my brother and said something. He shrugged. Then she walked to the front door. She grabbed the handle and pulled it open. The entry delay activated. Beep, 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 3 seconds of warning before the full alarm. She looked at the keypad on the wall beside the door. She typed in the code, the same 4-digit code she had used to enter. The code that no longer worked. The siren engaged. Even through the laptop speaker, I could hear a faint version of it. But the camera gave me the full picture of what that sound was doing to 3 people who had been comfortable a moment ago. My mother covered her ears. My aunt shot upright from the couch, still tangled in my blanket, and fell off the cushion. My brother knocked the chip bag onto the floor. They all converged on the keypad at the same time. My brother typed something. Red light. My aunt tried something. Red light. My mother was yelling, though I couldn't make out the words clearly. My phone lit up. Mom calling. I watched it ring. I let it go to voicemail. Mom calling. I watched it ring. I let it go to voicemail. Mom calling. I let it go again. On the camera, my brother had his phone to his ear. He was calling someone. Maybe me. Maybe his own version of a property manager, which was anyone who might know how to fix something. My aunt had given up on the keypad and was dragging her overnight bag toward the door, getting ready to leave even before anyone decided to leave. They had 43 minutes of siren. That was the window before the alarm company would automatically dispatch a patrol unit. I had set it for 45 minutes in the app as a maximum. I watched them make the decision at the 30-minute mark. My mother said something to my brother. He threw his hands up. She pointed at the door. He went to get his bag. They filed out into the night. It was November. It was the Smoky Mountains. The temperature outside was 38 degrees. My brother pulled the front door shut behind him and immediately tried the handle. Locked. He tried the code. Red light. He tried again. Red light. He looked at the camera above the door. He had forgotten the cameras were there. He looked directly into the lens. I looked back at him through the screen in Denver. My phone was ringing again. This time, it was my brother. I answered it because I wanted him to know I was watching. Adrian. His voice was tight. The alarm is going off, and the code isn't working, and it is 38 degrees outside. I know, I said. What do you mean you know? I changed the codes at midnight, I said, and I armed the alarm. A pause. A long one. You did this on purpose. You went to my cabin without asking, I said. Without calling, without texting, without any form of communication. You drove there, used a code Mom had no right to use, and when I saw the Facebook post, Mom had already told everyone I gave you permission. Which I never did. We are your family. You are adults who are capable of making a phone call, I said. You didn't make one. So now you are standing outside in November. Mom is 58 years old, he said. His voice was rising. She is cold. She has things inside. She is cold. She has things inside. Her medication is in her bag. I looked at the camera feed. My mother was standing by the minivan with her arms crossed. Her coat was inside. She was wearing a zip-up fleece over her pajamas. She looked cold and furious, which was a combination I recognized because I had caused it many times before, though never intentionally before tonight. Her bag is inside, I said. Catherine will be there at 6:45 tomorrow morning. She'll get her bag. 6:45. Adrian, it's after midnight. Where are we supposed to go? There is a Hampton Inn on the main strip in Gatlinburg. It's about 8 minutes from the Cabinburg. It's about 8 minutes from the cabin. They have rooms available. I checked earlier. You checked. I checked. Another pause. I heard my mother's voice in the background. She was asking what I said. My brother told her. She checked. My mother's response came through clearly enough. She can go straight to hell. Tell her I heard that, I said. Adrian, please, he said, and his voice shifted then. It dropped the anger and went somewhere smaller. Just let us back in. It won't happen again. We'll leave in the morning. And here was the thing about my brother. He was not a bad person. He was 28, and he had never really been required to take responsibility for anything because our mother had always handled it, or I had always handled it, or someone had always handled it. He genuinely did not understand what he had done wrong, because in our family, what they did tonight had always been allowed. What they did tonight was simply called visiting. I know it feels unfair, I said, but I'm not unlocking the door. Get a hotel room. I'll talk to you when everyone is calm. He hung up. I sat back in my chair. I looked at the feed. My mother was still standing by the minivan. My aunt was already in the car. My brother stood between them, talking to my mother. She shook her head. He gestured toward the road. She shook her head. He gestured toward the road. She shook her head again. He gestured again. Finally, she got in the car. My brother stood there for a moment, looking at the cabin, looking at the camera. Then he got in the driver's seat and backed out of the driveway, very slowly, and turned onto the mountain road, and the taillights disappeared around the bend. The driveway was empty. The cabin was quiet on the screen. The siren had stopped. I should tell you how we got here because it didn't start tonight. I grew up in a small town in eastern Tennessee, about 2 hours from Gatlinburg. My father worked for the county. My mother ran a daycare out of our house. Money was always tight, and I knew it in the way children know things, not because anyone told me directly, but because of the way conversations stopped when I walked into a room and the way my parents looked at each other at the dinner table when something broke. I was the oldest of 3. My brother was 4 years younger. My sister was 7 years younger. I was the one who read all the books about scholarships. I was the one who took the AP courses. I was the one who drove myself to the SAT twice because the first score was good but not good enough for where I wanted to go. My mother did not discourage me exactly. She would tell people at church that I was ambitious, but at home, ambition had a different flavor. At home, it meant I was too busy, too serious, too far away in my head. My sister was the fun one. My brother was the social one. I was the one who would leave. And I did leave. I went to school in North Carolina on a partial academic scholarship and 2 part-time jobs. I graduated in 3.5 years, moved to Denver for a data analytics position, worked my way up, eventually started my own consulting firm at 27. By 30, I had a company with 11 clients and 4 contractors and a savings account that my 20-year-old self would not have believed was real. The first thing that changed was the phone calls. They became more frequent. They became warmer, more interested. My mother started asking about my clients, my revenue, my plans. She started forwarding my LinkedIn posts to her friends. This was new. When I was 23 and working 70-hour weeks in a city where I knew almost no one, the phone calls were monthly and brief. The second thing that changed was the requests. Small at first. My cousin needed a car repair. My aunt was behind on a bill. My brother wanted to take a certification course, and could I help with the fee? I said yes to most of these because I had the money and because it felt like being close to them, which was the thing I had been missing. Then my mother started treating my generosity as a policy. There was a Thanksgiving where she told the extended family that I would be covering the dinner. I had not agreed to this. I found out when my aunt texted me a grocery list. There was a Christmas where my brother called me the week before to say he hadn't been able to afford gifts for his kids, and was I able to help, and I did it. And when I saw the photos online, his kids were holding gifts that were clearly from his girlfriend's family, and my contribution had funded something else. And then I bought the cabin. I had been looking for 3 years. I found the right property on a Tuesday morning in October, made an offer by Thursday, closed in 30 days. It was a 2-bedroom cabin on a wooded half-acre lot, 20 minutes from downtown Gatlinburg, with a stone fireplace and a deck that looked out over a ridge of pine and hardwood. I put it on a short-term rental platform because the revenue covered the mortgage and the management fees and left a small profit. More than that, I blocked off 5 weeks of the year for myself. It was mine. I made the mistake of posting a photo on Instagram. It was a single image, the view from the deck, taken on a clear November morning. I did not include the address. I did not tag the location. Within 3 days, my mother had found the listing on the rental platform because she had searched the photos until she matched the deck railing, and she called me to tell me the cabin was beautiful and that she would love to visit. I said, "Come visit. Just let me know when, and I'll make sure the calendar is clear." She said, "Of course, of course." That was the understanding. That was the agreement. "Give me notice, I will make it available, we can plan it properly." She had her own version of this in her head, apparently. Her version was, she said, "Yes, the details are flexible." 7 months after I bought the cabin, she called me to say she and my brother and my aunt were planning a trip to the Smokies in mid-November. She asked if the cabin would be available. I checked the calendar. I had a rental booked for that week. I told her it was occupied. She said, "Oh, that's too bad. Maybe another time." That was the only conversation we had about it before tonight's Facebook post. I don't know when she decided to go anyway. I don't know if it was impulsive, a last-minute decision on the drive, or something she planned quietly while saying nothing to me. I do know that she tried the code and it worked. And she walked into my cabin and set her bag down and turned on the television and began moving through the space with the ease of someone who had every right to be there. I know this because I watched the entry log timestamp and I watched the camera footage of the first 20 minutes. She never hesitated. She went straight to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator like it was hers. I thought about all of this on the night of the lockout while I watched the empty driveway on my laptop screen. The next morning, Catherine texted me at 6:52. I'm at the cabin. They're not here. Driveway is clear. Want me to do a walkthrough? I said yes. She called me from inside the cabin 20 minutes later. Okay, she said, in the measured tone of someone choosing her words carefully. It's mostly fine. Some dishes in the sink. A wine glass on its side on the coffee table looks like it leaked onto the wood. The throw blanket is on the floor. The cast iron skillet is going to need to be reseasoned. The fence post on the back is definitely cracked. A pause. And, Adrian, there's a sticky note on the bathroom mirror. I was quiet for a moment. What does it say? She read it to me. You have a beautiful house. Too bad you're too selfish to share it. I feel sorry for you. Don't bother calling. Catherine waited. Take a photo for documentation, I said, then throw it away. Already photographed. Throwing it now. Thank you, Catherine. Send me everything in a report. Damages, your time, all of it. One more thing, she said. The fence. Your brother hit it backing up. His truck is still on camera. Put it in the report. I hung up and I sat in my apartment in Denver and I looked at my coffee. I thought about the note. Too selfish to share it. I've been sharing my entire adult life. I had shared money, time, attention, proximity. I had driven back to Tennessee for Thanksgivings when I could not afford the gas, let alone the time. I had sent checks for things I was never fully told the truth about. I had answered phones at 11 at night and listened to problems I could not solve. I had bought a cabin with my own money, and I was too selfish to share it because I did not want 3 people driving there without asking. I opened my email and I wrote one sentence to my attorney. I need a no-trespass notice drafted for my Gatlinburg property. I put in the address and the names. He replied within the hour, Are you sure? This is permanent. I replied, I'm sure. The notice was sent by certified mail to my mother's address, my brother's address, and my aunt's address. The notice stated that they were prohibited from entering the property located at the Gatlinburg address, and that any violation would result in their immediate arrest for criminal trespass under Tennessee law. It was 3 paragraphs. It was polite in the way that legal documents are polite, which is to say, completely without warmth. My mother called me 3 times the day the letter arrived. I did not answer. She called from my aunt's number, which was not blocked. I answered by accident. Adrian. Her voice was shaking. I could not tell if she was angry or crying or both. A legal letter. You sent your own mother a legal letter. I did, I said. I raised you, she said. I raised you in that house and you send me a legal letter like I'm a criminal. You entered my property without permission, I said. I asked you to leave and you stayed. You left a note calling me selfish. This is the appropriate response to what happened. The appropriate response. She repeated it the way she repeated things she found absurd. I am your mother. There is no appropriate response between a mother and daughter. There is only family. Mom, I said. What? You posted on Facebook that I gave you permission. You told your friends I said you could use the cabin whenever you wanted. You said that publicly with my name. I never said that. A long silence. I was just trying to explain to people why we were there, she said finally. You were trying to make it look like I had invited you because you knew you hadn't been invited, I said. And that's not a misunderstanding. That's a lie. She hung up. My brother texted me that afternoon. A long text. The kind people write when they want to seem reasonable. He said he understood I was upset. He said he should have called first. He acknowledged that. He said the note on the mirror was out of line, and he had told Mom that. He said he hoped we could move forward. He said family was more important than a cabin. I read the text twice. Then I texted back. I'm glad you understand. When I'm ready to talk, I'll reach out. I did not say when that would be. I genuinely did not know. The weeks after the lockout were strange. My phone was quieter than it had been in years. The group family text, which usually generated 10 to 20 messages a day, went completely silent after the second week. Either they had removed me from it or they had stopped talking in it. I couldn't tell which. I didn't go looking. I had more time than I expected. I noticed this on a Thursday evening, when I realized I had been reading for 2 hours without checking my phone. I noticed it again on a Sunday, when I cooked breakfast without once thinking about whether I should call anyone. The mental bandwidth that had been running constantly in the background, the low hum of managing my family's perception of me, had gone quiet. 6 weeks after the lockout, I flew to Gatlinburg. Catherine had sent the repair bill, the cleaning bill, and her time invoice. I had paid it without comment. The fence post was repaired. The skillet had been reseasoned by a local cookware shop Catherine knew. The wine stain on the coffee table had been treated by a furniture restoration service. It was all fixable. It was all fixed. I arrived at the cabin at 4 in the afternoon. I parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a moment before going inside. I was not sure how it would feel. I thought it might feel contaminated, the way a space sometimes does after something bad happens in it. I unlocked a door with my new code, one I had chosen myself and told to no one, and I stepped inside. The fire was laid in the fireplace, ready to light, because Catherine had left it that way. The throw blanket was folded on the armrest of the sectional, fresh from the laundry. The cast iron skillet was hanging on its hook in the kitchen, black and smooth, like nothing had ever happened to it. I walked through the cabin slowly. I went to the bathroom mirror where the sticky note had been. There was no trace of it. I went to the back deck and looked out at the ridge. The trees had lost their leaves, and I could see farther through them than I could in summer, all the way to a second ridge in the distance that I had never really noticed before. I went inside and I lit the fire. I made dinner. I ate it at the table, with a book open beside my plate. At no point did I feel lonely. That surprised me more than anything. I had half expected my sister's voice in my head, the one from the sticky note. Too selfish to share it. I feel sorry for you. But it wasn't there. What was there instead was something I didn't have a word for exactly. Not pride. Not relief. Something more like, this is mine. Not in a childish way. Not grasping. Just a quiet and accurate statement of fact. This was the thing I had built, the thing I had earned, and tonight it felt exactly like what I had intended it to be. 2 months later, I invited people to the cabin for the first time. My college roommate, a woman named Philippa, who now practiced family medicine in Asheville, drove up on a Saturday morning with her husband and a case of good wine. My business partner, a man named Crawford, who had met me at a conference in Phoenix 4 years ago and had become one of the few people I trusted completely, drove from Nashville with his wife. One of my contractors, a woman named Simone Waite, Simone was on the list. Her name was Britt, a freelance researcher I had worked with for 2 years, who had driven from Knoxville. They arrived within 30 minutes of each other, and when I opened the door for Philippa, the first thing she did was hand me a small potted rosemary plant and say, "For your new chapter." She said it simply, without drama. She didn't know the full story of why it was a new chapter. She just knew that I seemed different lately, calmer, and that I had bought a cabin and was finally letting people visit it. We cooked together. Philippa made her grandmother's chili recipe, the one she had told me about for 3 years and never made for me before. Crawford's wife, whose name was Meg, brought a chocolate cake she had made from scratch in a rental house down the road. Britt brought a puzzle she said was too hard for one person, and she'd been saving it for the right occasion. We ate dinner with the fire going, and the conversation drifted easily, the way it does with people who are genuinely happy to be where they are. Nobody complained about the food. Nobody asked me how much I paid for the place. Nobody disappeared into a bedroom to make calls. After dinner, I washed the cast iron skillet by hand, dried it immediately, rubbed a thin coat of oil into the surface, and hung it back on its hook. Philippa was in the kitchen putting away the leftover chili, and she watched me do it. "That's a whole process," she said. "It's worth it," I said. She nodded. "You seem really good, Adrienne." I thought about that. "I am," I said, and I meant it in a way I hadn't been able to mean it in a long time. That night I slept in the cabin bedroom with the window cracked open. The air coming off the mountains was cold and clean and smelled like pine and wood smoke from the fire pit down the road. I could hear nothing except wind and the occasional call of something in the trees, an owl maybe, or just the sound the mountain makes when it shifts and settles. I did not dream about my mother. I did not lie awake running through the conversation I should have had with her, or the conversation I would have if she called, or the conversation that had happened 100 times in my head over the years, the one where she finally understood and I finally felt seen. I had stopped waiting for that conversation. Stopping was not the same as giving up. It was just the accurate recognition that the conversation I wanted was not one she was able to have. There was a letter from her eventually. It came on a Tuesday in January, 6 weeks after the certified letter from my attorney had arrived at her house. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope. I set it on my kitchen table and looked at it for a day before I opened it. Inside was a card. The front of the card was a painting of two hands, one old, one young, holding each other. Inside, in her handwriting, it said, "Adrian, I have prayed on this every day. I forgive you for humiliating us. Your father would be so sad to see what you've become. We are still your family. A simple apology is all it would take. Love, Mom." I read it once. She forgave me. For what, I thought. For owning a cabin, for changing the codes, for refusing to unlock the door while my mother stood outside in a fleece in 38-degree weather, in a situation entirely of her own making, after posting a lie on the internet with my name attached to it. She forgave me, and all I had to do was apologize. 5 years ago, I might have. I want to be honest about that. 5 years ago, the exhaustion at being cut off from my family would have outweighed the principle of the thing, and I would have called her. I would have said something partially apologetic, something that acknowledged her feelings without fully agreeing with her version of events, and she would have accepted it graciously, and the whole cycle would have continued from a slightly different starting position. I did not do that. I put the card back in the envelope. I set it on the counter. I went to make coffee. When the coffee was done, I came back and I put the envelope in the recycling bin. Not the trash. The recycling bin, because I am who I am. Then I opened my laptop and I emailed Catherine to ask about March availability at the cabin, because I was thinking about going back for a long weekend and I wanted to make sure the calendar was clear. She replied in 20 minutes. "March looks wide open. Want me to block off a week?" "Yes," I typed back. "Block the whole week." I closed the laptop. I sat in my apartment in Denver with my coffee and the winter light coming through the windows, which are tall and face east and are very good in the morning. I had a proposal to finish, a call with a client in 2 hours, and a flight to book. My life was mine in the way it had always technically been mine, but had not quite felt mine until recently. I thought about the cabin, the fire I would light when I arrived, the coffee I would make in the morning, the view from the deck, the ridge of pines in March just starting to show the pale green of new growth. The door was locked. I had the only code. And for the first time, in a very long time, that felt exactly the way a home is supposed to feel. There is something I keep coming back to when I think about that night. Not the siren, not the camera footage of my mother standing in the driveway in her fleece. What I keep coming back to is the cast iron skillet. I built that seasoning over 4 years, layer by layer, a little oil after every use, dried on a low burner, hung back on the hook. Nobody taught me to do it. I read about it, practiced it, got it wrong a few times, got it right. It sounds like a small thing to care about, but it is exactly the kind of small thing that tells you who a person is. The care you put into something when no one is watching is the truest version of who you are. My mother scrubbed that skillet with dish soap and a rough sponge. Not out of malice, probably, out of not caring enough to ask, out of the assumption that my things existed to be used and the details of how I maintained them were not worth knowing. That is the pattern I spent 32 years inside. The assumption that my effort was a resource, not a reflection of who I was. The assumption that my no had an expiration date if they waited long enough. The assumption that love meant unlimited access and that limits meant the absence of love. What I understand now is that those two things are not opposites. Limits are not the wall between you and someone you love. Limits are the reason love stays healthy. When I gave Catherine's number and said midnight, I was not being cruel. I was finally being honest about what I needed, which is something I had not been honest about for most of my adult life, because honesty cost too much. It cost comfort. It cost approval. It cost the image of the generous daughter, the one who made it and brought everybody along. What my mother did not understand, and maybe still does not, is that consequences are not punishment. They are just the shape of the truth. She used a code she had no right to use for the purpose it was not given for. She lied publicly to cover the gap between what she had permission to do and what she wanted to do. She stayed when I asked her to leave, and then she waited for me to forgive it because she always had before. This time, the truth had a different shape. I think about Adrian at 16, studying vocabulary words at the kitchen table, being told to put the book away and be social. I think about how much of my energy went into managing other people's comfort with my ambition, into making my success smaller so it fit inside the frame of who they needed me to be, into writing checks to close the distance between who I was and who they wanted. That is a tax no one should pay indefinitely. At some point, the math stops working. The note my brother left, too selfish to share it, was meant to wound me in the place I was most vulnerable, the fear that my success had made me cold, that I had traded warmth for achievement and come out lonelier for it. I know exactly why they chose that. I had been carrying that fear myself for years. But here is what I know now that I did not know at 31. Choosing yourself is not the same as losing everyone. The cabin in March, Philippa handing me a rosemary plant, Crawford's wife bringing a cake she made from scratch, Britton and her puzzle that was too hard for one person. That was not an empty room. That was a room I had cleared space to fill with people who showed up because they wanted to be there, not because they needed something from me. The door is locked. I have the only code, and I have never once regretted it.